You're very welcome to episode 44 of the Scaling Your Business podcast. On today's episode, I've got Kenneth Carroll, founder and managing director at Carroll Food Services. Kenneth, you're very welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Rian.
Delighted to have you. Look, the typical format here is we go back to kind of chapter one and work our way from there. So what I mean by that is, well, we've got an international audience, so we won't be super specific, but you grew up South Dublin, correct?
That's right.
Any favorite memories of your childhood growing up there, primary school, secondary school kind of time?
Yeah, well, I remember I had a lot of good friends, and my favorite times were actually playing with neighbors, and it's one of the things that came up actually recently in my own mind. I happen to live now on the road that I grew up on, and you never see kids on the street anymore. And everybody used to go out and mix during free time, and we'd all be out. You'd go out after breakfast and you come in home for tea or something like that, and all the kids used to play together. Now we're much more insular as a society, and so my happy memory is being able to mix with lots of different kids on the street and just play and have fun. Now it's quite different. It's a different dynamic, and I had a lot of fun times as well. Dad was a very active individual and was always up and doing something and trying new things and bringing us out on the boat or whatever. And he went and bought a boat and never sailed before in his life. And he went and bought a sailing boat and said, right, we're off down to the channel now. So that was part of growing up as well. And a bit of fun. Yeah, it was good.
Sounds like a good childhood. You touched on kids not hanging out outside nowadays. There's an ongoing debate between my girlfriend and I because she grew up countryside, up the Dublin Mountains, actually, if anyone's familiar with Hellfire Club. It's not too far from there. And I grew up in an estate. It's a beautiful place. I grew up in an estate. I live in Ratoath, County Meath, 20 minutes from Dublin Airport. And as we entertain the idea of kids in the future, it's a debate between whether we purchase a house in an estate or we stay in the countryside, because I'm like, well, the memories and all my memories of a childhood are playing football out on the green with my friends, and she has the argument that kids don't do that anymore. So I moved into an apartment maybe 2-3 years ago, and I observed, and I know very few of my neighbors and no kids play outside, but I'm still not giving in to the whole not moving into an estate. So maybe I'll win, maybe I won't. But anyway, one of the questions I like to ask people is from where they're from, what's one thing that if someone had an afternoon or a day in Dublin to see one thing, what one thing would you recommend they should see?
No, there's one for you. One thing that they could see, I think there are a lot of things that we could see, and there are different parts of the city that you could recommend. I always recommend to people go in and experience the when the city is open, go in and experience the buzz in town and look at the old buildings and so forth and so on. I think as a city, we're in a wonderful situation. We're beside the sea and we're beside the mountains. So you can do, if you have a couple of days, you can go to the mountains, hill walk in the mountains and see the wonderful Garden of Ireland. And then you can go to the seaside and walk along the sea, or if you're lucky enough, you can go out on a boat or take a trip out to Howth. There's so much to do in the city. We have
for sure
a huge amount to offer. So one favorite thing, well, I happen to love sports, so I'm a Lansdowne Road man, not the Lansdowne Road attendee whenever that's on, and also love to play sport. But that's from a visitor point of view. I think we've so much to offer from a culture point of view, in the centre of the city, from a landscape point of view, going out and visiting the countryside. And that really sells our city, as well as the people. Meeting people is very much part of what Dublin is about. I mean, if you hear people who have come to see Ireland and see Dublin, it's about the people, how friendly they are, and let's cultivate that. Let's bring the community spirit forward into this generation, and continue that culture of friendliness and welcome. That's what I'd say.
Absolutely. You touched on your father purchasing a boat and some memories down the Shannon. I'm sure he wasn't the only part of your life when you were growing up. So who do you think had the biggest impact on you as you grew up?
Well, when Dad passed, I said in the eulogy that he was a hero to me, and he really was, and is still. He is my hero. He's a mentor, a motivator, in a lot of which he achieved, and so forth and so on. That's not to say my mother wasn't as well. She was a motivator and very much a huge support in my life. So they both influenced my life hugely. I was an only child, so I got very different things from both of them, and a great balance. But if we're focusing on the business side, probably Dad, because he was, his story was a wonderful story. He left school at 16, was brought in by his father to meet Captain Jury in Jury's Hotel in Dame Street in the centre of town. And he was put to work on a management training program, and starting in the kitchens and working his way up. And then by 18, he'd left the country and gone to work for British Rail Hotels in the UK. He worked hard up the ladder there on a management development program, and they sent him to Switzerland. And he stopped off in Paris on a stage there in the Georges V, and then, you know, worked in lovely properties in Switzerland. And so that was the story, and particularly back in those days, you know, when he was born 31, so even in the 40s, and he was off traveling, when not a huge amount of people were doing that. And then he came back.
What brought him back?
What brought him back? Well, he came back to British Rail Hotels, then had, you know, got a very good level in there, and he came back and got a job here. And he was manager of the Bailey restaurant in town at 23. So I think he got an opportunity to come back and do that. He was saying that when he was leaving Morecambe, it was just after his 21st. And all the hotel guys got up at 6 o'clock in the morning to see him off. And make sure he got on the train. I'm not sure. But he came home then and started his career in restaurants and catering and so forth and so on. And how he progressed his career, that's a huge motivator for me. You know, he never stopped. And up until the day he died, he was as sharp as a tack, and was always looking for things. And I suppose as he got older, he became frustrated that his body wasn't able to keep up with his mind, and so he was a driven person, and that for me, that epitomized what it is to be as an individual, as a man, and that you're driven to achieve and push yourself on. And from my mum's point of view, she was very much she managed the home, but also she was involved in the business with Dad, and brought a very different skill set to him. Was a very intuitive person, and quiet, but, you know, at the end of the day, she'd absorb everything. And then the huge punch was when she came with her analysis at the end of it. And that was a huge mix of skills, you know, between the two of them, and very complementary, and got a great deal from her too. And she and I had a great rapport in terms of sense of where we were from, the sense of family history, origin. And it happens to be a huge interest of mine. And I bore the pants off them at home, talking about where our family is from and so forth and so on, and tracing all the ancestors and looking at family trees and things like that. But it's hugely interesting to know where you're from, and where your roots are, and, you know, where the families originated from, and all that sort of stuff. So That answers your question. Hopefully it does.
Your dad seemed to have a great work ethic, and I've got a couple of questions around you and your dad working together. But hats off first to your parents for working together. I don't think that can be easy, because I couldn't imagine working with my girlfriend.
Yeah.
But focusing on the strong work ethic and climbing to where he did at such a young age, he must have dedicated a fair bit of his life to work. How did your parents come to meet?
They met at a dance in a tennis club in Temple Oak, and Mum lived in Phibsborough, so in those days it must have been quite a trek across the city to go from north side to south side. You probably needed a passport at that stage, but they met, and Mum noticed Dad, and he was a dapper man, so he cut a dash, and she put her eye on him, and they started to. She actually invited him to her 21st, which was in Portmore, and she wrote to him and invited him along, and he responded, "Thank you very much for the kind invitation, but I'm afraid I have to say I don't know who you are." And he said this to his golfing buddy Niall, who happens to be Mum's first cousin. And he said, "But don't you dance with her, John, every Sunday night in the tennis club?" So, and that's how it went. And they dated for a number of years. And I think Mum didn't quite realize how interested she was in Dad till she went in Dad's office in the Bailey one day and saw the brochures out for America. Dad was thinking of taking up an offer in the States, in California, to manage a hotel over there. And indeed, when he was in Switzerland, he'd had a number of offers to go, but he didn't. But he obviously had some sort of hankering for the bright lights over there. But anyway, that wasn't to be, didn't happen. And they got together, and the rest is history, as they say.
I'm not too sure if it was this week or last week, but you put up a post on LinkedIn that it was 53 years this week or last week that the formation of John D. Carroll Catering was 6th of May, 1968. So shout out,
Yeah.
that's phenomenal. But what was life like working with your father?
Dad, life was very good. I mean, that sounds a bit trite, but I started doing summer work for Dad when I was sort of before my teens, and doing a couple of hours here and a couple of hours there. And particularly during the summers, I remember he had the National Gallery restaurant, and I went in, I think I was 10, and they gave me a job on kitchen control, calling in the orders. In a restaurant, the waiters, the serving staff come up, and you call in the orders. Somebody calls in the orders to the chef, and the chef notes the order, and then you call the order away when the servers are ready to collect it and get down to the guest. So that was my job for a while, and they were doing about 120, 150 covers a day, people serving people a day, and that was one of the first jobs I had with them. And then I went down to the office and learned how to do stock, and that was great for learning various things about the business and stock control and margins and so forth and so on. And I was still only 10 or 11 or whatever it was. And then I graduated on to working on the vans, and Dad had a food distribution business at the time. And I worked my summers on the vans and all of that. And I was put on the payroll and earned my few bob, and away I went. So in that instance, his business was big enough for me to find a niche that didn't necessarily involve me with him every day. But yet he was checking in on me and so forth and so on, of course. But that was great discipline. And then as things progressed, like when I left school, the thought in my own mind was that I would probably go straight into the business. And then that changed. In a lot of his friends said, no, let Kenneth go and get his experience somewhere else. And then the thought progressed into going into college. So I did. And I went into Galbraith Street, the College of Catering in Dublin. And I didn't achieve as much in my leaving cert as I had wished. So I went in second year in the diploma course. I repeated part of my leaving cert with the college exams, and then progressed into the degree program and got my degree and all that sort of stuff, and started to work then after that, after those 4 years. But the great thing about college, and I'm digressing a little bit, but the great thing about college was that they actually insisted that you do placements during summer. So my first year, I was working as a waiter in the Celtic Muse, junior waiter. Great stories around those days. And then the second year, I worked as a commis chef out in the Abbot in Monkstown. And they opened a new restaurant, and then they opened a deli, and I got involved in the management of the deli and so forth and so on. So that was great experience. And then in third year, I had a stage in the Shelbourne Hotel as a junior manager. So, and I worked in all the departments in the hotel. And then you went back and got your degree. And I really felt that was a hugely integrated program that gave you an all-round experience in management, which was good preparation for me. When I left college, I then went in to join my dad. And he jokingly said to me when I went home, having with the degree in my hand, he said, now you have to get your stamp from me, Kenneth. So I don't know if it was a joke, but anyway, I went in and we did work together, but it was an interesting introduction into the office because he brought me through, introduced me to all the people, and then said, now there's a desk, find a job for yourself. Rather than me getting a particular niche, a particular job, which was it didn't exactly enamor me in the first instance because I thought I would get a structured job, and I had been in structured roles up to that. But the fact was that I had to find things to support other people to do and learn all of the aspects of the business. And in hindsight, it was a bit of a culture shock, but I had to find what it was to be a general manager rather than a single discipline manager. And that took a little while. But he then got me involved in some consultancy projects that he was doing. And I would do the background work and the analysis of the figures and so forth and so on, because he was, as well as the 50 or 60 other sites that he got me involved in doing tenders for new contracts. He got me doing the budget analysis on how the figures came together and future budget planning and so forth and so on. So that brought me into having an interest in doing management accountancy, which I did, and I qualified in. And nice. And then I progressed after that to do a master's, and I drew the line in that in terms of formal education and tertiary education. But I've done ongoing courses right through. But how working with him, it was a slow process in terms of learning how to work with him. But at least within the business, I had space to learn the role, and then also a new dynamic with my father, going from just being the father that I knew at home to the father that I had to work with. And it was closer. And I remember going into the office one day, and he said to me, do you really like this business? And I said, yeah, I do. He said, are you sure? I said, yeah. He said, well, you don't always show it. And he said, it's not all a bed of roses, but if you are interested, you need to just knuckle down and that was also a bit of the training in terms of not every part of every day is savory. It's not all bed of roses, but you got to get on and do it,
You touched on the college you went to. Strange enough, I went to the same college, DIT Carroll Brewery. I did tourism marketing, but one of the things I loved the most outside of the lectures was the catering students, because there was, and I don't know if it was there when you were there, but there was a room dedicated to students who had cooked anything, and you were able to, as a fellow student in the college, go to that room and purchase these goods, or if they're going out on a date within 2 or 3 days, take them for free. So I used to get cakes, croissants, everything for free going to that college, which was one of my favorite memories of it. And through my research, there's a couple of things you're interested in: wine, piano, sailing, art, tennis. You've been on holidays to places like Switzerland, and I don't know whether that's because of your father's time there and he brought you in your child. I know your dad was a past president of the Grange Golf Club. Not sure if you're interested in golf, but what I do know is that you are an Irish and Leinster rugby fan. So with all that said, what's one thing that you're into or curious about that not a lot of people know about you?
Well, I'd be a private enough person about my private side. So, a lot of that, a lot of people wouldn't know that. And like, they might know the fact that I had a calligraphy business when I was in school. And I was doing calligraphy for various institutes, and they had fellowship scrolls. And it was then I used to do the whole scroll in hand script. And Gothic script that I used at the time, and that helped me go through college and gave me a small bit of income, but also gave me a sense of self-satisfaction. I loved it. Dad wasn't president of the golf club, by the way. He was president of lots of other things, but not the golf club. He enjoyed his golf, and there was a great heritage in the family of golf. And my son and I are only discovering that now, and my son is enjoying golf now, so I'm taking it up. Nice. And hopefully we can do that together. But other things that people don't know about me, I mean, there are a lot of involvements that I have. I think, in terms of my sense of balance in life, I suppose that's the thing that I perhaps like knowing most. I say that not only am I involved in my business, but I have a great sense of giving, a responsibility to give to the community and to give to my industry, and to partake and to contribute what I can, because I've been gifted huge knowledge and experience, and if I can give that back in some way, and for whatever value it is to people, make it available, I feel that is a responsibility. So I'm involved with, I've just finished an involvement with HALE, the Housing Association for Integrated Living, which is an approved housing body, and I followed my dad into that and onto the board, and that I saw huge growth there, and it was very satisfying, where you were actually working with the government bodies to secure housing for people who needed homes and housing. And it was founded out of the Mental Health Ireland way back when St. Brendan's closed, and so that was giving back. I've just been invited to go on the board of the Spade Enterprise Centre, which is an incubation centre for fledgling businesses, where they take space within, or small businesses, where they take space in the Enterprise Centre. And they've asked me to go on with the specific responsibility or interest in advising on the new shared kitchen facility that they're building there. So that's very exciting, where you see businesses coming along in the food space. And volunteering, I'm involved in Rotary International and involved in the Community Service Committee there. I chair that. And I'm also involved heavily in my local parish at home as chairman of the Pastoral Council. And we've just developed a new parish centre there, and we're in the process of putting the protocols and procedures and raison d'etre in place for that to open soon. So that's all very exciting. It's all very exciting. It keeps a balance and a level of interest, you know.
Yeah. Moving over to business, what's your favorite aspect of being an entrepreneur?
The favorite aspect, I think, is the fact that I can have the freedom of my own mind. And if I may relate back to when Dad sold the business, he sold it in 1992. to a company called Sutcliffe Catering, and he said he took 5 years to convince my mum and I that it was the right thing to do to sell the business. But he was absolutely right. He was a forward strategic thinker, and that is something that I certainly have learned and refer back to in my own mind and my thought process. So freedom of thinking. When we sold, I became the sales and ops director for the new business, and we doubled the size of the business. But it was very much prescriptive management, if you like. There was the company that bought us was from a different jurisdiction. It came from across the water, and there were subtle differences in terms of the mentality of how they managed the business, which quite frankly didn't fit with my mindset. I was a multidisciplinary sales and operations. They were saying, well, you either are one or the other. And I said, no, my father trained me to manage all aspects.
Yeah.
And that was so that freedom of being able to think for yourself, not prescriptive management, not having to write reports for people who you probably don't see. And those reports go to a board that you never get to present to. So I present to myself and I bounce ideas off people, but they're my own ideas, and that shapes the business. And that's not to say that I manage by diktat. I have a great team, and we do share ideas, and we collectively develop the shape of what things, how things move on.
Before you got into your own business, you did have multiple roles in other businesses. Some of them included, you've touched on junior manager at Shelburne, director of marketing and development at your father's business, sales and operations side of things. What lessons did you learn from those roles?
Well, I learned, there were lots of different disciplines, as you say. And I think the progression from, the food side, from waiting to the kitchen through to the junior management in the hotel, that was very much the hospitality end of things, and was very much front of house or back of house, and the production side, if you like, and managing at the service levels. Management is very much, or my career has been very much about building layers. And I think you learn different disciplines at different levels. And I think, as you know, from Carroll Brew Street, hospitality is a very practical industry. It gives you a training for life, as well as a career. Like when I was in the Shelburne, I went and cleaned rooms for part of my junior managership in housekeeping. The cooking skills that I got bring on to life. You don't have to stay in hospitality. Well, yeah, they stay with you. There's a sense of discipline, particularly in the industry, that comes right through, and you have to be quite disciplined in the industry. And it's a self-discipline that you really need to impose on yourself to progress your career. I think that self-discipline is important, and it is certainly a lesson learned. And then, as I mentioned when I started with my business, how to keep a number of balls in the air. I started with Dad's business, and that progressed into my role with the company which bought my father's business as well. And then it certainly stood me in good stead when I started out on my own, because when you start on your own, you're sitting in your own room and you've nobody else to answer to. You got to do the figures, you got to do the sales letters. I remember my father coming into my room one night, and I had got an old daisy wheel printer, which made a hell of a racket. It was like a train. And he said, for God's sake, it's 1 o'clock in the morning. You ever stop doing those letters till the morning? So you had to do everything. You have to be a master of all things. And hopefully that answers the question, I suppose.
We paid respect earlier on to your father's business, registered 53 years ago this week. But you yourself are celebrating your 27th year of business That itself is also worth a tip of the hat. So fair
Thank you.
play to you for that. I'm sure you've come up with challenges, lots of challenges throughout those 27 years. I know one thing you've touched on in another recording you did with someone was the recording came out in June. Not sure when it was recorded, but it was recorded as coronavirus hit, was that you had lost all but three of your clients had shut down, and
Yeah.
that you had to adapt a lot. So focusing on, let's say, the last 18, 24 months, what's a challenge that you, or objection that you came up against that you didn't expect or account for, and how have you tackled that?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think the challenges that we faced in the last 14 months or whatever it is, where I started off thinking not again, because 2007, 2008, we fell off a cliff, and we lost 70, 80% of our business, and that didn't return. So we had to go and reinvent business then. And my dad was very much involved in that, and he and I put our heads together and we pushed things along, and along with the team that I had with me. You know, I have an operations manager who's been with me a long, long time, and he's a great font of knowledge, and he's a friend, a great sounding board, Dave. But coming back to your original question, in terms of what, you know, how we've approached the last, we have 3/4 open at the moment. We have 4 because there's a school open at the moment, but that closes again at the end of May, and we'll be back to 3. We've had to be fleet of foot. We've had to adapt. We've had to look at try and develop new service offerings, and very quickly on, I think the podcast that you referred to, I mentioned the new service that we developed last summer, which was in preparation of companies reopening, and they might be reopening at a much smaller level. So we developed a delivered in service with a menu cycle, 14-day menu cycle, to cater for smaller numbers. And indeed, that improved our reach as well. What I didn't realize was that wasn't really going to get traction, because businesses didn't come back at all. And then I was, you know, working with my dad, because he was more and more, last year he had a lot of time in healthcare. He broke his leg in February, and was in a nursing home for a long time. And anyway, when he came out, we had to work a meal plan for him. And then that wasn't quite working terribly well. And we started to look at how a meal plan would look like if we were developing a business model. So we started to look at that on a delivered basis. And that was the germ of an idea. I started playing around with the ideas, and then I started a conversation quite by accident with a company in the north of Ireland called Connected Health, who are in the home care delivery business. And I said, what about developing a value-added service for your clients, where we would have a meal plan for those people? And Rian, who's the CEO of that business, said, that's a great idea. Let's push that along. So we started to blue sky. We had a couple of Zoom roundtable meetings, and we came up with a plan. And so we sorted out the manufacturing, packaging, logistics, and we are a very advanced stage of developing an app for it. We have the app developed, which will give us the ordering facility, the nutritional values, all of that sort of stuff, catering for special diets. And then we've sorted the logistics to as a delivery. So that's all in plan, and we actually did research behind it, both internationally and locally with Connected Health clients, and we're now moving to trial with that service. So that's a new departure, but it meant that we actually had to sit back and say, well, what business are we in? We're actually in a food business, and how do we deliver food? Does it have to be in a fixed setting? No, it can be a delivered option as well. And we have segmented our market a bit more. in terms of the way in which we look at it.
Final question for you, Kenneth, is fast forward to the end of the decade, 2030. You can answer this personally, professionally, or both, up to you. But what would you like to be looking back on if we're imagining now as 2030 over the last decade?
I'd like to be looking back on a life where I gave it my best shot in all aspects, and try something new. Always try something new, and not be so caught up in what you're at that you can't look at it differently. That might be a vague answer, but that would be a general way. And also, I would want it said that I gave back. So that I would have tried everything, developed the business further, that I would have led a business which was fleet of foot and able to adapt, and that we would have grown to the full potential of the business.
I've had a pleasure getting to know you and chatting to you over the last 35 minutes. I wish you nothing but success going forward. I'm sure you'll get out of it like you did in 07 and 08. But from my end, thank you for the last 35 minutes, Kenneth.
You're most welcome, Rian, and good to talk to you.